things pop culture and fandom through the lens of social science and experience. I am your host, Forward Progress, and joined with me, as always, is my lovely and talented co-host.
Ahoy hoy.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, I am Nova Rose.
Oh, yes.
I'm here.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are. I appreciate you making the epic troll to drive to our office to be able to record today.
You know, it's a trip. It really, I don't know how I survived.
I know. I
So,
appreciate you though, in all ways. Now that we've gotten that ridiculousness out of the way, I'd like to introduce our special guest for today. For a special episode we're recording. This actually is a longtime friend of mine that I've known for, gosh, it's going on 20 years almost at this point, and somebody who I've had a long journey in today's topic with. You may know him in certain Pokemon circles as Torias, but I know him better as Scot. Thank you for joining us today for the program.
Hello, and thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I was glad to finally pull you up to be like, here, come do a project with me. So today's topic, I hinted at it a moment ago, is we're going to be talking all about Pokemon. This year is 2021, and it is the 25th anniversary of Pokemon. We had some big announcements earlier this year of some new games that are coming out, a really well done video celebrating 25 years that came out last month here. So we're going to talk about all things Pokemon today. So I'm going to start just asking an open-ended question of everybody here of, 25 years with this franchise here, of what has Pokemon meant to each of you throughout the years?
So, I can honestly say that 25 years ago, I did everything that I could to distance myself from Pokemon. I would have been just at the age where I was a little too old and a little too young to really fit into either one of the communities. Uh, I know it was incredibly popular, and I was just an angsty middle schooler who decided that it was just too popular to be a part of. And I did everything that I could to avoid it. I didn't, I knew some of the words, I knew everybody was all riled up about their trading cards, but I just, it just wasn't for me at the time. And it wasn't really until after I had graduated through high school that I started to look at the game from a different lens, from a slightly less opinionated childhood view of it. And went to Walmart one day, was bored, and picked up a copy of Pokemon Sapphire, and that was the beginning of the end. It appealed to all of my hoarding, and it was a way to collect as many things as I could collect, and miraculously the cartridge never got bigger, never had to purchase a bookcase, never had to put boxes in the basement. It was just a great way to continue to grow and grow and grow a collection without requiring any more room to keep it in, which was great because most of my life I had been a trading card collector, and that just becomes onerous very quickly. So I
Yeah.
fell into Hoenn, and Hoenn really claimed my heart. And I remember, I think the first time that I even really learned about the other species that weren't Hoenn native, it was always fun for me. I remember Colosseum came out, and the first time that I saw a Furret, which was a thing that had been around for ages, it just, I got so excited because here were new species that I wasn't aware of, but had actually existed for many years, and it was a lot of fun. Like, it was great in the beginning, learning all of the different types and finding them. And as some of the reboot games like Leaf Green came out, going back and exploring the Savai Islands and finding some of the stuff that just I was able to move into my Hoenn game that never belonged there. And the way that Game Freak has updated the compatibility for the species, and just continued to expand things that interest me, like the breeding and the ability to move egg moves and species and balls and the apricorn balls, and to really get some glamorous, highly difficult to breed species moved into the current gen. It's been a very long journey that appeals to my particular brand of crazy. So it all started being bored at Walmart, actually waiting for you to get off shift, if I don't, recall correctly.
It probably was. I won't lie. That sounds about right.
So that's kind of how I came to it. I managed to avoid it all the way to Gen 3 before it ever really touched me as anything other than an obnoxious thing kids did on the back of the bus.
It definitely. I think there was definitely that back in the day of, and I think that this happens when a lot of new properties release, especially ones that take off and get super popular. Is you kind of have that in-group, out-group type of thing that happens where some people will latch onto it and others will not, and because they don't and are therefore not part of the in-group, they almost repel back against it that much more, because it's like I need to have my own in group. Being in the out group never feels right, and it's something your brain doesn't like. So you kind of want to find other people. So I know a good parallel to this was I think we talked about this on the podcast before, would be those who would share those Game of Thrones memes where it's like, I'm one of the people who have never seen episode of Game of Thrones. Who's with me? It's kind of that you're looking for somebody to form your own in-group with, and your in-group is based on people who are not part of the trend. And it's kind of like that preservation of self-esteem. It's crazy how these things work, when at the end of the day, it's like, they're ridiculous pocket monsters. Nothing more.
I think that's true. And I think, too, I had allowed myself to get into the Power Rangers right at the end of when it was okay. So when I was the most excited, a lot of other people were starting to check out.
Mm.
And let's face it, I don't think anybody, if I'm being honest, expected us 25 years later to be discussing Pokemon and Gen 8 and what we're going to do with a gaming system that's 8 consoles down the line, and how, now it's open world and we're going to run around in the game that many of us always wanted. And I just don't think that we saw that happening. At the time, it felt like flash in the pan and a way to sell some trading cards, and 3 or 4 years later, it was just going to be niche and gone, like the Ninja Turtles, like a lot of the things in the 90s that have also found staying power, that I would honestly hazard the opinion that nobody saw that coming.
Mm-hmm. There's definitely, like, recently, and again, another thing we've talked about before is nostalgia is very powerful right now, and I think
Especially in our generation, I think nostalgia
yes.
hits our age group a lot harder than it hits even Gen X, but especially the boomer generation, and I would argue even the generation below us. I think that we're in a very unique place where the way the 90s felt to me, we were hoodwinked into believing that the world was healed and better, and Martin Luther King killed racism, and everything was just going great, and women were perfectly equal to men, and everything was all better now. And here we are 15 years, 20 years out of high school, realizing that we were lied to the entire time to keep us complacent. And I think that we as a generation crave going back to our childhoods where things were a heck of a lot simpler. And I believe that, our franchises are definitely an anchor to that. So whatever it was that appealed in those years, that's your emotional anchor to a time when things were significantly less confusing.
It's definitely it's a time of tough conversations right now, and now some properties are taking that full head on, but some are getting, where it's controversial of the, oh well, like Animaniacs is a good one that had a reboot recently, that If you haven't seen it, it's I personally recommend it. It has a lot of great stuff. And yeah, there is some political humor in there, and it's interesting because you'd see people kind of raving back against that, and yet, that being said, if you go back and watch the 90s, I mean, heck, Bill Clinton was right in the opening credit sequence. There was always that little tinge of that extra sense of commentary within it. So, you know, there are people who just want that simplicity, but that reality that this conversation's been there all along this entire time, and we just have to face reality now and have these tough conversations to make real progress. And, you know, we're going to get into some interesting things in Pokemon and balancing within the generations here in a bit, but I definitely wanted to turn over to you, Rose, and just ask, what was your first experiences in Pokemon and developing, you know, into the, you know, the passion that we've had over the years for it?
So first I want to go start just by ruminating on the fact that these cute creatures have been part of my life for freaking quarter of a century. You know, I remember, I guess, I don't quite remember because it's been so long, and I was like 4. I was really, really young. Where my mom one day gave me and my brother the if anyone or if either of you remember it was the purple see-through Game Boy Color.
Yes.
And I got Pokemon Red and my brother got Pokemon Blue, and it was just like, I remember starting it up for the first time and just being absolutely fascinated that there was this whole world inside of this box.
Was that one of your first video gaming experiences, period?
Yes. With I think Spyro being shortly after that. But and then I also remember, like, I got really into the show, and like I remember, like, whenever like a new movie would come out, like we had to go to Blockbuster and rent it. And I also remember, like, because like my mom used to do eBay selling, so we would go to garage sales every Saturday. And after, I guess that was like, you know, like after we watched our Saturday morning cartoons, we went and did the garage sale trip. And I remember, like, we like always like kept an eye out for freaking Pokemon cards, and had, I think I still have my binder from back then of those cards.
You still have, what, the original generation of the card game?
Mm-hmm.
That's impressive.
Sadly, I think my brother managed to go get a first edition Charizard, and unfortunately we have no idea where it went.
I was gonna say he'd be rich by now.
Seriously. But yeah, no, like, just those times were absolutely so long ago. Good memories. I also one other memory I want to share, because you know, Scott was talking about Hoenn. I remember how absolutely fascinating it was when we finally found out about, like, the whole, like, Reggies and Braille thing. That just blew my mind as a kid when we finally figured out what the hell was going on.
There was a lot of, and I want to touch upon this, and I'm going to share my memories here in a moment, but there is something about that time in history of the 90s where the internet was developing, and we were starting to get online as a culture, but it wasn't anything like nowadays. You know, we had the early days of dial-up and such, and
well, the only way that, like, we got any information, like, you know, when I was in school, was it's like we had to go find out rumors on the playground.
Exactly.
So it's like, you know, like, there was some crazy things, like, of course, like, everyone knows the Mew truck thing, like, that's...
Well, that's, and I guess it's a point here of nowadays with the internet, within, like, the day a game comes out, almost all the secrets are online.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of changed the culture a little bit, I would say. Like, how do you feel, and I guess this question goes for both of you, about your experience in Pokemon, or maybe just even gaming in general, nowadays versus when, 20 years ago or so when we were first getting into all these franchises?
Granted, I'm not a kid, but I'm a squid. But but like, I think it definitely loses some of the magic, I'd imagine. But at the same token, like, I'm not a kid, so like that would be something to go ask the Zoomers, I think, because they might have their own experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's definitely a difference with everything being so easily walked through and so easily unraveled. A really great example that isn't Pokemon is World of Warcraft. That game came out 16, 17 years ago to a crowd of people that had just a vast, gigantic world to explore and things to learn, and nobody had a clue what was going on. And so 2 years ago, the publisher Blizzard decided to re-release the original game in its original iteration, and they called it Classic.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of taking weeks or months to unravel the secrets of raid bosses before raids even opened in the game, guilds had already come up with hundreds of potions and hundreds of all the materials that were needed to walk in and clear the raid in the first week. And so to me, the idea of Classic was amazing, that you could step back in time and re-experience the original game without any of the updates, without any of the changes, the way it was really seen 20 years ago, or 16 years ago. And it just wasn't the case. So as much as we may want to go back, we have to realize that even to play Mario 3 or to go through and play the original Zelda and not have a clue where that one bush on the one frame that you have to burn with a magical candle to find the dungeon to actually beat the game. Like, everyone knows there's a bush, you have to burn it, go get a candle. That the magic will never be there the way that it was back before information was so easy to transmit. I remember you had to buy a box of apple cinnamon Cheerios, and you had to eat the cereal and cut the box apart, and on the inside was the location of the warp whistle for Mario 3. And that was how information was spread. And now, I agree, the magic is just not there. But because of that, I think the games are coming out with far more secrets. If we look at the DLC for the Crown Tundra, how many secrets are buried in there that would have been impossible to figure out? And not just through Braille, but the Keldeo footprint thing and where the birds were flying off to. I think the games are able to be far more intricate and a lot. Breath of the Wild is another fantastic example where you can see there's just layer upon layer of mystery, and knowing that people will have the ability to figure it out. If Breath of the Wild had released 20 years ago, the vast majority of players, I think, would never have completed even 80% of the game. So there's a give and take with that information.
Although one thing that's kind of interesting is, especially like now we're in the age of like streamers, where like, we can know something, or like a game just front and back, but then like, you can watch a streamer where it's like it's their first experience with it, they know nothing about the game, and like you can kind of like live that brand new feeling with them, which is very interesting. Where you're like, I know there's a hidden wall there, but then it's like they're trying to like, find secrets or whatever, and I find that interaction very interesting.
There's definitely something to go back to classic games now, and we see that in certain streaming channels and such, that there is a almost a complexity that you see within the gameplay of somebody who's a more quote-unquote modern gamer going back to the classics. And watching how they progress in those games versus what we've become accustomed to today. The interesting thing, especially with online, and this is a point I want to make too when it comes to secrets and such and how the information spreads, is it may be different, but it's also kind of it's a self-imposed whether you look for that information or not. The information is out there. You do not always have to go searching for it. Some of this might just pop across your feed on social media or something, but not everything is going to. And depending on the circles you travel, obviously. And maybe that's kind of that balance nowadays, is you decide how much of the adventure you're taking in on your own and how much of it you're going to go just look for the answers online. So
I think that's fair.
Yeah. So I got a lot of other questions I want to get into and everything we've been discussing, but I'll go back and talk a little bit about discovering the series, the franchise, I should say. My initial experiences with Pokemon were largely through the anime, actually, of watching 4Kids back in the day. This will take us back, won't it?
Good times.
4Kids. And your weird localization, we'll say.
Hey, Jer.
Yeah.
In a few hours, the sun will rise.
Do you want a jelly donut, honey?
Freaking jelly. Like that? That's just freaking... Although, the freaking drying pan, though. I love the drying pan.
The drying pans. Yes, this frying pan's a drying pan. But that being said, it captivated me as a kid, even though it was quirky and odd and had some very interesting localization and choices and translation and such. But I was just pulled in a little bit into this world with these adorable creatures and such. And my first game then was Pokemon Yellow. And I loved having the little Pikachu follow me around. It's funny to me because anybody who knows me knows that I'm pretty Pikachu'd out at this point. After 25 years of Pikachu being always the face on everything, I'm kind of ready for other Pokemon to take the spotlight.
Give Eevee a chance.
Eevee has gotten up there, though, you will say. And when they do polls of top Pokemon, I want to say Umbreon gets ranked very highly on average in most of those polls of Pokemon fans. But that being said, there was something to that, and it was interesting because I remember going through my head time and again, because we've done panels on Pokemon, and when you start looking into the Pokédex, just how kind of dark things can get, and it's very interesting because it seems very dark, but at the same token, it really, for the most part, is just all based on nature and folklore. So it's kind of this fun combination of things. And granted, when I was a kid, Pokemon was also controversial. We had that time where the Pope had to bless Pokemon to say that it was okay to play Pokemon. This was a thing that had to happen back in the day. I don't know if everybody else remembers.
True story.
Yeah. Because people thought it was, evil, or it was tempting kids to do, dog fighting and such, which I can understand where on a base level it might seem that way. And I've even looked at it and been like, you're just capturing creatures into balls and then making them battle each other. But when you really get into the game and the whole thing is about companionship and teamwork, the comparison that I put in my head is a lot of sports, especially things like pugilism, like boxing and such, where that is a sport where literally people sign up to beat the crap out of each other, or UFC, that's the sport, but people willingly go into it. And that's the thing of the idea behind the series is to make companions and become more but more than what you are through your journey, which always, that's been a big representative piece for me over the years of like, I always want to grow into something more than what I am now. Granted, I don't always have to be the very best, like no one ever was. I had to come to terms with that. That I feel like going through here, it's more being the best is being the best that you can be for yourself, that you're living the best that you can and giving the maximum effort that you can. And I feel like that is what is really being the very best is all about. Now, I've gone through a lot of different things with Pokemon over the years. I've watched the anime a lot as a kid, played almost every gen. The one exception, actually two, yeah, I haven't played Gen 5, believe it or not. I still haven't to this day. I'm gonna go back. Rose has offered to let me play her copy of, which is it, Black or White? One of them you offered to let me play.
I think it was Black.
I'm going to do it at some point. But there's this interesting evolution over the years of, the series has done a lot of different changes and such, and I want to talk a little bit about that here with everybody, because we talked a little bit here about the secrets and the challenges of it and how that's changed because of the internet. But some of it can be in gameplay too, because there's definitely been alterations and changes in multiple different directions over the years, and I've heard complaints from classic players of almost that the new games are too easy, too simple. It's not a challenge anymore. And how much of that do we feel is just a side effect of we've grown up now, we've played this our whole lives, and how much of it is alterations to the game? Because the balance too is you want to always find a way to bring in the new generation, because this is a game series that appeals to people of all different age ranges. So you always want it to be such that you're not just appealing to those of us who started playing in the 90s. You want to appeal to people where Sword and Shield is their first game. So what is your guys' opinion on finding that balance, or how do you feel the balance is maintained within the series?
I think a big thing to go be said is they've made the games just way too easy. And that's not even like counting like, oh, like I'm older so I understand the mechanics better. It's like they basically like they removed all the dungeons. They now have it where every single Pokemon levels at the same time. And you can't turn that off. So, like, whereas like before it's like you had to go switch out each individual Pokemon. There definitely, like there wasn't much of a Pokemon pool, but yeah, it's just that there's certain things that they decided, especially the Sword and Shield, that it's just like this game is really easy. I mean, it doesn't have to be like freaking Dark Souls level of difficulty, but like a little bit of challenge.
I think I agree with you on many of those points. I do think that now in 2020, 2021, things are a little bit more hectic, a little bit busier, and I think people crave a bit of instant gratification more than they used to. So the idea of the experience share, bumping all of my Pokemon up at the same time, at 36, I have less time to play Pokemon than I did at 21. So for me, I'll agree that it's easier, but it's an easier that I welcome into my life so that I can get to the end and start my breeding a lot faster. I can see where both sides of the conversation fall, but for me, many of those changes have been welcome simply because I am not a Eastern grinder game style person. If I have to spend 6 hours getting buffalo hooves for some recipe just to advance to the next level, like it's going to lose my attention very quickly. So to not have to grind quite as hard just to get my team up to the point where it's playable end game. I welcome that, but I can definitely see where people would want to be able to turn those features off and play the traditional way as well.
Well, that's the thing that baffles me is apparently people that went into the code actually like there's apparently an item that they edited out of the game that would allow you to turn it off, and it's just like, why did they remove my ability to choose whether I want it on or off? Like, it's fine to have it there, for people that want to do it that way, but then it's like, what about like more like old school people that like want more of a old school experience? It's like I don't understand that decision.
And this is part this is part of a much larger conversation when it comes to gaming difficulty and the purpose of games and marketability. And we're not going to answer all those questions in what time we have left. That being said, there is always that thing about you want a game to be marketable overall and appeal to a broad audience, because at the end of the day, making video games is often labor intensive, expensive process, and not all games really make their money back. So going through everything, you need to have those levels of that accessibility and that marketability, but you also want to be able to appeal to an audience. Part of the accessibility, I guess you could say, is being able to also appeal to people who want that kind of that more difficult or that old school experience here. So is the ultimate answer to this that level of the difficulty items, or the optional journey, where if you want this experience, you can use this item. If you don't, you don't use the item, or choosing a difficulty feature at the beginning of a game. Is that kind of that ultimate compromise?
I guess another thing that could be said is like, if they wanted to go change the experience a little bit more, then like I kind of was in a way hoping that they were going to go more towards the Let's Go style, which I know I'll probably be flayed for that, but like I loved that game for like, I mean, sure, it's like a remake of a game that's been remade like twice, but it was so like fun and charming.
Let's Go, I said when it came out, was the game I had waited my entire life for. It was like living the anime in a way. And I had a lot of fun with it. I definitely did. I saw where it wasn't the same as the traditional Pokemon, but I was okay with that. And I think that's the thing about a franchise like this, is you can have different offshoots from the franchise of different games and products and properties that can give unique experiences. So maybe that's kind of that other side of that coin of, maybe it's not just about this specific game, but it's more about the like which game is your style, and you just have different variations on the game that on the concept of Pokemon.
No, I think that's a great point. And everybody's unique style, at this point, 25 years later, that's the great thing about the longevity of the franchise, is I think we've all had a version now that we can think back to. Pokemon Emerald comes to mind, because Emerald was the first time we really got any, and maybe last time we ever got any notable endgame, with the Battle Island and the tower. And they've worked a Battle Tower into so many other games, but it's just not the same as what we had with Emerald. It doesn't feel the same. And then you had the Delta chapter at the end of, I think it was X and Y, which was a lot of fun too. But for me, endgame is a big deal. For other people, difficulty level. And I think it's great that we have options in our franchise, which so many other franchises don't really get.
I will say, like, I was crossing my fingers that Alpha Sapphire and Omega Ruby would have added the battle island, because like that was, I think, like I had so much fun with that end game content, but then it's like not there, and it was like I think they had the battle tower, and it was like such a missed opportunity.
So, speaking of kind of end game content and such, one of the things about a franchise like Pokemon, especially within the realm of video games, is that you have a couple of different play styles that people will do, where you'll have people like myself. I'm not much of a competitive gamer. I'm very much of I'm there for the story and the experience and the journey, and then to do, and to have fun with it afterwards. But I know you, Rose, have had a little more experience on the competitive scene, especially you, and I know your brother does a lot of this as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, what for you makes a great experience within that, and for the competitive player in you?
I'm a highly competitive person, hence me yelling at like Destiny, Crucible, and stuff like that. Like I love some competition. So, when my brother discovered Smogon, like I actually got to experience like what like the actual like Pokemon meta was, as far as like how like battles can work, because I feel like just playing like the base game of Pokemon, especially if you don't really have many friends that play it, you don't really get a feel for how the battle mechanics can really work. Whereas Smogon, it's like you have everything under the sun with like infinite amount of players that you can go play with that like know the mechanics inside and out. So it was like I got to go create teams and figure out how Pokemon would work and how to use them. Whereas like the just playing the base game, like you would never know, because when you're playing the base game, the AI pretty dumb. Like you're just like sitting there like at this trainer. It's like, why have you used Growl 5 times in a row? Like I don't get it. So that's been really awesome. I want to start getting into the Pokemon card scene, because I was playing a little bit of the trading card game, and collecting some cards, but I want to actually play in person. So hopefully we'll be able to soon.
Now, go ahead.
There's just one little rant I want to go on. That my brother actually discovered this, because he got into Sword and Shield much later, where both of the DLCs were out, and he discovered that you can go to the Crown Tundra like at the beginning of the game. Now, or no, it was Isle of Armor. Well, you can go to both of them, but I digress. Apparently, in the Isle of Armor, you get an item, and I don't think it actually explains how this works, but basically it like doubles or triples the amount of experience you can get. So if you're there at like the very beginning of the game, like you can get all of your Pokemon to level 100 before you beat like the first gym. It is absolute broken. I wonder if they'll ever fix that. And once again, another item that you cannot turn off.
So, I want to get more onto kind of like the social aspect here. Because, like, for you, there's a lot that we've done. There's a lot that we see, both. You've done a lot of the trading card game and also competitive, like, in the video game scene. So, obviously, there's definitely that competitive element in there. But there's, world championships and all kinds of things are still going on to this day. How would you rank your experiences within the Pokemon community as, compared to other fan communities that you've been a part of?
Well, I would say for me that I think the Pokemon community is maybe a little bit more diverse than any other community that I'm a part of personally at this point. I can, say, like I mentioned earlier, I've played World of Warcraft for almost 15 years, since the second or first expansion, really. And the community is not exactly growing. I think it's shrinking, and in many ways, some of the hardcore players that are left were the parts of the community that you didn't necessarily want to associate with. And there's just a lot of vitriol. There's a lot of "I'm better than you because I've played for so long" on the internet, around the forums, even in the game itself. It's it's a somewhat toxic fandom that I know a lot of fandoms suffer from these days. But there's that entitlement that if I've played from the beginning, then everything I say needs to be right and the company should bend to my whims. And I know in Pokemon, we have a very similar, we all want our Pokemon to follow us. We all want Heart Gold and Soul Silver. We all want an end game and a Delta chapter. And each time a generation comes out and we don't get it, there's disappointment. But there's not the angry backlash. There's definitely feelings tied to it, because 25 years is a long time to love something. But I think the players are a lot more understanding, and especially in the last few years, where we have had Pokemon Go. My local playgroup, the people that I spend the most time with in real life, doing gyms, doing raids, they're all older. We have some grandparents in our raid group where you see this group of people and you have no idea what it is they're doing, because there's only 2 or 3 kids under 12 and everybody else is an adult between 30 and 60. And I think that's really, really awesome that just so many different people come together to fight Dialga and try to catch him. And it's been a really awesome experience having Pokemon Go added to the franchise, I think.
While I do have my gripes about Go, I will say I think both Pokemon Go and Let's Go, to an extent, were very interesting additions, because it kind of like made Pokemon a lot more accessible to people that would have otherwise never looked at it. So yeah, that's very fascinating.
There's definitely that, and I think that there's something to be said here to piggyback off of everything you guys were saying here. And I think every fandom has that, where you have those vocal people who will speak out, that make a fandom in general seem toxic, and then it's hard to tell a lot of times what is and isn't the quote-unquote toxic fandom, because you end up having the vocal minority that drowns out the rest of the people, because that's what sticks out to you. That all being said, there's definitely something to talk about wanting a franchise to continue and to grow. And if you stagnate in anything, it's just gonna kind of start fading away or just fall off. And adaptability is one of the things that I found is key in anything that I've done in life. And as much as we want the nostalgia and we want to go back to the beginning, there has to be that allowance for the new and the evolved, to take a Pokemon term for evolution.
Well, I know like this is something that me and my brother have talked about a lot, is does or should Game Freak pass the torch of Pokemon to a different company? And it seems like they're trusting more companies with the IP, like say like the Diamond and Pearl remake that's coming out is being made by a different company. I don't quite remember the name of it, but so it's like I would love to go see what a different company with like new people and like what new people would do for the franchise, as opposed to kind of just doing the same thing for 25 years with slight variations of the model.
We've had interesting conversations about when you take somebody who truly loves and understands a franchise and gives them the ability to like to get their hands on and do something with the franchise that they love, We talked about that recently with DuckTales, that a lot of the people who went into the new DuckTales reboot went in with a lot of passion and a lot of love for this franchise and only wanted to make it better, and it showed. Another Pokemon-specific example here is the Detective Pikachu movie. Is you could tell they went and they got somebody who was known in the community for drawing lifelike representations of Pokemon, brought him in to help work on the film. That you could tell the way that the Pokemon acted in the film was consistent with their Pokédex entries. There was a lot of love put into that project, and it showed. So maybe that is a thing here of when you're looking at who to bring on, and I guess this is the evolution piece on both sides. As fans, we have to be open to welcoming the next generation and inviting them in, but also the creators, if you want something to last, if you stick so much with the old instead of bringing in those people who do have a genuine love and bringing them in to bring in some fresh takes, is that kind of that balance then?
Mm-hmm. I am kind of glad that it seems like, to me, it seems like they're shaking things up a little bit with Arceus. So like I'm very curious what they do with that game. Like, it kind of reminds me of Let's Go in a way, but there's really not much on it, so I kind of have no idea.
I'm gonna offer a very likely unpopular opinion based on my time on the internet and say that I had my issues with Sun and Moon, mostly around the storyline and some of the themes in the story being incredibly dark and unpalatable. However, I loved the island challenges because for the first time ever, we didn't have 8 gyms that we had to travel to and beat and go to the final 4. And it was a break in the formula, and I was 100% there for it. Were they all fun? Maybe. Were they at least different? Was it, you walk in and avoid the eyesight of as many trainers as you can and then beat the gym leader and move on. I liked hunting for things in the jungle. I really was very there for it. And in seeing a lot of other players' comments, they really did not care for that at all. And they welcomed the change back to the gyms, which was a return to formula. So I think, Game Freak has tried to break out of the mold, but each time they've been met with a lot of resistance. And hopefully they continue to push the envelope and come up with new things. I think Arceus is a great step in the right direction, really building on Let's Go and putting it into the wild area and combining the successful parts of the last few games into what hopefully is what the player base is truly craving.
I think one thing I'm going to say that at least I'm craving is, like, I want to see like a Final Fantasy 14 style Pokemon game. I think that can be a lot of fun.
What, like an MMORPG?
I know there have been like independent projects that were, I think, unfortunately shut down, the MCA and all that jazz. That did it pretty well. So it's just like if the demand is there, I'm surprised they haven't really jumped on that yet.
There's definitely potential. There's a lot there. And it's tough. There's definitely some things that are happening where you can see they are listening to the demands of the community. Because Diamond and Pearl remakes, everybody was talking about them. The open world concept, because I think people really did like the concept of the wild area in Sword and Shield, and it seems like we're getting a development from that, maybe with a fusion of some of the concepts from Let's Go, where they could be developing something new, and part of the unfortunate thing in a world like video games and such is, if you want to do trial and error, it's very difficult to, because you got to invest in all of this to make a game and then release it to know, does this land or not?
What does this blend?
And it's, because there were things that I think were definitely great about Sword and Shield, and things that I missed not having in Sword and Shield. And granted, I'm still playing it. I still enjoy it.
I just wanted dungeons. That's all I wanted.
And maybe that's something, maybe that's something that will develop, or maybe we'll get something new entirely. And who knows where the franchise is going to take us next. And I think that's an exciting time that we have right now, where 25 years in and we're looking at this new concept of a game we're going to get in about a year. And you go, what? We don't 100% know what it's going to be. And there's some kind of like just jazz in my step, so to speak, that I get just thinking about the fact that I'm not sure what's coming. And I kind of like that.
Oh, no, I completely agree with that. I think they're definitely taking feedback, and I'm very excited to see where things go from this point forward.
So we're starting to run a little low on time, but we got a little bit yet. So we mentioned a little bit about Pokemon Go. So Pokemon Go is about 4.5 years old now, going on 5 years, which is crazy. Actually, it'll be 5 years this summer that Pokemon Go has been out, which is surreal to think about now. They've done a lot of changes to the game since it first came out, and a lot of improvements within there. And one thing I wanted to kind of get everyone's take on is, what is everyone's experience been about the Pokemon Go community interactions, whether it be team versus team interaction, because that's one thing that's built into the game, is this kind of like capture the flag style gameplay with the gyms of, you've got your Valor, Mystic, and help me, Instinct. You know what's really sad is I'm Team Instinct, and that's the name I couldn't think of.
No one remembers, you guys.
Oh, thank you, dear. But I guess that's my point, too, I think when it first came out, it was very territorial, I would say, between the teams. And what has everybody's experience been on? Is that continuing? Is that lessening? Is the community itself in everybody's individual interactions anyway? Because I know it's hard to speak as a whole.
Well, I think that it's had to fade away, and I think Niantic is actually pushing it away, because in a lot of cities now, I live in Pittsburgh, so we have larger play groups, but because you needed multiple people on the same team to buff your catch ball count, a lot of people in the area would all just convert to the same team, and rather than play capture the flag, they would rather have more chances to catch their legendaries. And I think that it became a point of frustration that everybody either had to be the same team or lost out on the ability to have as many resources to do the time-intensive raid catches. So I've noticed, I think personally, that Niantic has really tried to step back from that. If you look now, raid balls are based upon time instead of team, and maybe that's them looking to the future and going to try to rebuild the team mentality while taking away the disadvantages of people being on opposite teams. And I think that could be a really neat thing in the next coming year, where they actually go back and focus on some team pride without any of the drawbacks, and hopefully that happens, because I think that could be a lot of fun.
Well, it's interesting, because I remember when it first started, there was that whole meme where like Team Valor took things way too seriously, and like there was a lot of dunking on Team Valor, which stinks, because it's like, I love Moltres and I love the color red, so of course I chose Team Valor before I knew the stigma that they had. But then it's interesting, because I've noticed, like, as the years went on, I started to notice that it kind of switched, like, where Team Mystic seems to be, like, at least where we were, like, Team Mystic was just super territorial. And it was like, Valor couldn't have a gym up for, like, more than a few seconds before Mystic just took it over.
I know that was always an interesting thing for you and I, because for those out there, I'll say I joined Team Instinct and Rose joined Team Valor, and that was always a very interesting thing years ago of us playing together, is we both liked, like, I chose mine because I liked Zapdos, and I liked that representation of Zapdos for the team. bird, and you like red, and you liked your team leader, and it was like we really had honest discussions about if one of us could change teams, would we? And what's funny is they finally came out with the ability to change teams, and neither of us did in the long run.
Well,
And
there's that added benefit though, where like say if one of our Pokemon have been in the gym for like way too long and like no one's knocking it out, then like one of us can just knock the other one out.
True.
And then then we would take over that gym.
And granted, like the Pokemon Go at times can be a frustrating experience too.
Very.
And not to throw this all on Niantic, because I think that's a very big thing. Is a lot of people will do that because we as people oftentimes try to find a scapegoat, try to find somebody who we can place blame on, because it kind of takes away that internal like turmoil of like something's going wrong in the world. I need a focus to get that energy onto, and unfortunately for Niantic, it's their game, so they're going to get a lot of it. But Niantic also can't control everyone's internet connections and can't control personal interactions. And I've actually thrown this out there that I think a great development, if they could ever figure it out, would be communication, like a text communication with your friends in Pogo. I've thought that would be fantastic, because it would make much better way to coordinate with people to make these events happen and such, especially for those who are in maybe not quite as broad of an area or in much of an urban area. If you're in a more rural area, it might be simpler to find new ways to. Maybe that's something for the future to think about. And granted, I'm not a programmer. I don't know how difficult that would be.
Also, one thing that I just want, especially like if you're doing a 1-star or a 2-star raid, please, for the love of all that is holy, like add a button where you can just like immediately start instead of having to wait for like a minute and a half just sitting there. Like I know I can take this on by myself. Please let me just start this thing.
There's a lot of things, and there's a lot of things we can nitpick about everything with the franchise, but that's every franchise. If you want to pick apart, if you really want to get down to it, I don't care what it is, Star Trek, Star Wars, you could pick apart anything. But the reality of making anything like this happen is there are so many people who have to come together to make this final product. And in the case of Pokemon, you have people from Niantic, you have people from the Pokemon company itself, you have people from Game Freak, you have other companies coming in, you have Nintendo, you have within all of them individual programmers, directors, playtesters. You have so many people that are involved in this that yes, there might be little things that might happen that might not always line up. But at the end of the day, there is a community of people who believe in bringing this product to us. And that's something amazing to think about, that 25 years later, after all that has come, people still want to do this to bring a little joy into all of our lives. And that's what I call keeping friendship magic. So there's so much more we could really talk about, but I know we're about out of time here. So I kind of want to open it up here of kind of just any last words or thoughts that people have about our topic of conversation today, and just about Pokemon or gaming or just whatever have you. And I'll start with you, Scott, of anything kind of you wanted to leave with.
Sure. Well, one thought that I had earlier and didn't have time to interject, when you were talking about the papal blessing, I actually seem to remember that was around the fact that the Pokemon evolved. And the Catholic community had a real issue that Pokemon was pushing the evolution agenda. And I believe that, because I'm sure it will show up in the comments section if I'm right or wrong, but I believe that was actually what drug the Pope into Pokemon, was the idea of evolution. On a much more related topic, I think gaming has been a big part of the last 20 plus years of my life, and a large portion of that pie has been Pokemon, and I've really appreciated the community around it. I think Nintendo in general has a really great, very, very fervent fan base in their different games, Mario, Zelda, and Pokemon. And, you know, just from little things like standing in line for 3 hours in 12-degree weather to buy amiibos, or uh, all of the aspects that Pokemon and those games have brought into my life. I've appreciated the people that they've brought in with them. I've appreciated the hours that they've helped to fill and the fantasy worlds that they've helped to create. It's definitely been a long journey, and I look forward to where it goes. But I've appreciated it in ways where I don't actively think about it, but know that it's really shaped a lot of who I've grown into over the last 20 years.
Definitely. Rose, any final thoughts you had on Pokemon topic in general?
I mean, you know, like, Pokemon is such a big part of, well, all three of us' lives, to the point where, well, Pokemon's going to be part of a very large event in our lives, and I'm very excited for it. But I digress. I'm surrounded by Pokemon. Whether it be the games, the plushies, the cards. Maybe we might get into the show because I keep hearing great things about it. Yeah, I love Pokemon.
I'll finish up by saying that one of the things, and because some of these moments, even when we've been critical here, I've noticed that sometimes the people who are the most critical of a franchise are the people who love it the most. And the most important thing when we're having these conversations, and I think all three of us here are grounded in that reality of when we want something, when we're critical of something, that we want to see it just be better. And we're also understanding that it is a challenge to bring these things to life. And that having these conversations about both the good and the bad and the opportunities are what keeps us pushing for even better things to come for this community and for our future. Well, looking at the time, it looks like we're going to have to sign off here, but I want to thank everyone for listening today. I want to thank Scott. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was a pleasure to have you on. And Rose, Nova Rose, thank you very much for joining us yet again.
Of course, I get to talk about Pokemon for a really long time. I'm always down for that conversation.
And that being said, thank you all again once more for listening today. And remember to keep friendship magic out there in the world. Take care, everybody. A huge thank you to our patrons, SamuDash, Jason Kuzmak, Fatman Dan, NeverendingNerd, Riftwing Designs, and Frenchie McHugh. Without your support, this project wouldn't be possible.